Ora tātou e hui hui nei, e nā hapu o tamariki, o rangatahi, o whānau, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I have just brought greetings from the village of my place where I live, from the Tūhoe and Rungapani people, and I have acknowledged you and greet you, and I want to acknowledge you as the sub-tribe of people who look after children, young people, and families. Tēnā koutou. After all is said and done, we want to think about the fact that at the end of the day, it's very easy for children, individual children, to slip off the radar. And that's a worry to me, and it's something that we have to be thinking about all the time. And so that's why I'm here to try to think about how do we locate each child at the center of our child and youth care engagements and not just see them as a part of the group. And sometimes part of the group means some get lost. I want to acknowledge the Circle of Courage, because I'm going to use that as a frame, but I also want to acknowledge the influence of Leslie Dutoy as one of the contributors to making the Circle of Courage what it is, and I'm afraid she sometimes gets left off the list. I want to focus on 4 different types of outcomes that you will see in the course of your work as you engage with children in foster care, in extended family care, or in residential care. And each of these 5 developmental outcomes are listed under each of the 4 Circle of Courage quadrants. For a start, we have to think about the fact that every child comes with some notion of a place of safety placement. Even if they're sent for supervision because of delinquent activity, we are expected to provide safety, and that safety is a feature of every day and every hour. And it includes everything from physical and emotional and social safety to right up to the current issues we now have with social media and all of the other parts of safety. It also involves positive communication, and if we don't offer the opportunity and engage children with that focus in mind of positive communication, we leave them to find us. And their experience with positive communication is often underdeveloped. Caring relationships is what we have an obligation to provide. It is relational care that we provide, not just care and supervision, standing around looking at them. Carer support, acknowledging where and how those children need support at this moment, at this time, and in these circumstances. And finally, boundaries for daily living are not just the rules that are operating in a place, but are the boundaries that we engage personally with each child to make sure that those relational moments have boundaries that keep them safe, keep them positively communicating and engaging in the world they're in. You'll notice there's an E next to each of these 5. That means that they are external. They are around the child, at least to begin with, until they begin to incorporate them and internalize them. So belonging outcomes are a starting place, and it's essential that we start there. The mastery outcomes, if we look at those, we'll find that they're both internal and external. The question is this child actively engaged in learning? And actively engaged in learning doesn't mean they're just sitting around doing homework. Actively engaged in learning can be a variety of things that happen at home, around home, outside, and in around their world that they live in. The question is whether we provide supportive environments for that to happen and how those supportive environments are maintained in order for us to include those children towards mastery and development. Carer involvement in learning is an essential element to it. We have to be thinking about how we engage in that learning process and keep involved in that learning process. Otherwise, our involvement is we tell them what to do and they may or may not do that. Motivation to achieve. Some people have said this kid's not motivated. I've never met a kid who's not motivated. I've met kids who aren't motivated to do what I wanted to do. I've met kids who aren't motivated to do the things that their families want them to do, but I've never met a kid who's not motivated. The question is, how do we engage in that motivation and see how we get on the same wavelength with them so we can move forward? And lastly, under mastery, thinking of making use of opportunities for school learning and home learning. That learning isn't just about the subject matter, it's about the learner. And so we have to think about how we reinforce and support the learner in that way. So mastery outcomes, those are essential development as we move forward. Independence outcomes already bring us to situations, as you'll see in the photograph, where how did that child learn to do that and what that gesture means in that way. And often that's what they've picked up from family experiences and others around them. You'll notice that here, almost all of these outcomes are associated with the internal world of a child. How do they learn to make decisions and plan things if we don't engage with them in an interactive way to help them develop those planning and decision-making achievements? How do they use their personal power? Are they holding back all the time and letting other people do the things for them or speak for them? Or is their personal power so evident in the fact that their tantrums are throwing all over the place that we miss the point, and we need to think about that personal power and how to help enable it to be more sophisticated? Responsibility, every day, every hour, there will be moments where that can be nurtured and supported. And if we don't do that, then we don't help them to learn responsibility. Activity programs, things to get actively involved with, they're not just time fillers. Playing football is not just a time filler. A child who learns how to play a game or engage with a game with other people or play musical instruments with other people, they learn to create opportunity moments for themselves when they're elsewhere because they have skills and expertise on how to do that. And lastly, under independence, the idea of positive view of personal future, that if we haven't, by the time this child gets along the way in our care, if they don't have a beginning to have a positive view of what's possible, then what are we doing to help them move forward? Lastly, the generosity outcomes has to do with how do we learn and how do we help children learn to provide service to others. It may well be through a pet, it may be through activities at work, in their home, learning to do the dishes, sharing in the laundry. All of these elements are about service to others. And if they don't learn how to provide some service to others, then they become really quite difficult to live with because they're pretty self-centered. Peaceful conflict resolution. How do we help nurture better ways of solving conflict between people? Because these are ordinary, everyday kinds of things. Conflict doesn't have to be a big 5-star event. It can be a minor event, but it's still very important for each child. Caring, how do we help children learn to incorporate a notion of caring to other people for the needs of other people or recognizing? That's part of that nurturing. Fourthly, honesty. How do I learn or help a child to learn to tell the truth even if it hurts? And those are some of the big elements that can be very difficult to deal with. And lastly, under generosity, high expectations. How do we help children to have higher expectations than people believe they could have? I've been around a number of places where I've found that people actually have low expectations, and so children live up to the low expectations rather than high expectations, and we engage with them to be excited about it. So there are elements here that are important. I must say that each of these outcomes, the 20 we've chosen, 20 external, 20 internal, are adapted with permission from the developmental assets that the Search Institute developed, and with 50 years of experience and over 3 million children and young people to base it on, these 20 outcomes are not just plucked out of the air, they're research derived and ones that are trauma informed, and we can actually use them in helpful ways with children. So overall, if I step back, to what extent is this young person developing as a confident young person with a sense of belonging? If that isn't something we see starting to happen, then we're needing to do more work as child and youth care workers to get a hold of that and connect with that to make it possible. If mastery as a successful learner is stalled, then we need to think about how do we help facilitate that capacity to learn and to communicate what I'm thinking about, what I'm feeling, and how those elements work with us. Because it's very easy to say they've just not done their homework or their grades are down. The learner part is the part that's personal. Thirdly, capabilities for independence as a responsible citizen. Physical growth and development towards self-care and autonomy is something that must be learned from an early age. And it needs to include consideration about health, mental health, and dental care. And I'm a real strong advocate about making sure that we look after children's teeth, because looking after children's teeth has a lot to do with their health. It also has a lot to do with their identity and how they see themselves. And we need to be thinking about that holistic piece, because mental health is not just an add-on. It's an element of health, dental health, and mental health. Finally, an effective contributor with generosity of spirit. Children with generosity of spirit can begin to move forward to see where and how they can be part of something. And that's about a capacity for happiness and a sense of purpose while attending to the needs of others. These are the things that we are having to consider as we facilitate those notions of belonging, of mastery, of independence, and of generosity. And our hesitation about that whole framework of the Circle of Courage, as beautiful as it is, it has lacked specifics in many respects, and we think these specifics help to pin that down and give us the confidence to work with that. If you are interested in this further and looking at how we frame that within the tradition of the ancestral houses of caring that are found in New Zealand and are located everywhere, they're not just a dream catcher, they're actually real things that have specifics to them, then join us for the workshop that follows after the tea break, and we'll be happy to explore that further with you. Thank you very much, and tēnā koutou katoa.